because the environment I'm in, you'll probably be able to know the proximity of my location, because intermittently we'll be probably hearing airplanes flying over. So just in case it disrupts you a bit, please, I beg your pardon. I'm somewhere close to the airport. However, I don't think it's going to disrupt us so much because it's raining, so possibly we may have less air traffic. But I just wanted to put that out there, just in case you start to hear and you're wondering where is she connecting from. So we'll move on now to case studies and strategies for effective sustainable value creation. I believe we'd had an enlightening session with the first presenter when we looked at the corporate governance aspect of this topic. Now we'll be delving into these learning areas. First, we'll look at the introduction to sustainable value creation, then look at case studies. What have other organizations done when it comes to sustainable value creation? We'll move on to emerging trends and challenges. What kind of trends should we be looking out for when it comes to creating sustainable value for our stakeholders? And then we'll look at what it means, why stakeholder engagement is important for sustainable value creation, and what kind of responsible business practices should we adopt to ensure that we are creating sustainable value. Then we'll look at action plan for enhancing corporate governance, because it's impossible to talk about sustainability without really framing up your corporate governance structure to accommodate sustainability. So we'll look at that, and then finally we'll look at how to cultivate the culture of sustainable value creation. Because for you to have a sustainable organization, culture is key, okay? The corporate culture is very key for a sustainable process to be effective. So we'll look at that. That will be the final learning point for us today. So I want to start with some opening remarks. The truth is, when it comes to the concept of sustainable value creation, it's not particularly new, although we are probably realizing that there is a lot more information and buzz around sustainability and sustainable value creation. Now, the reason is that there is a lot more heightened attention on the role sustainability plays in our corporate organization. But sustainability and sustainable value creation is not new. Now, why this is important is that there is a lot of heightened anticipation, particularly investors, business owners, governments were currently challenged by the pressure that we put on our planet. So we have to realize that the responsibility to ensure that we're living sustainably and our corporate actions are sustainable behoves on you and I, every individual in this training. Now, traditionally, we always knew that the focus of organizations is to create profits, profit maximization. And that is usually short-term because, as individuals, you put money in the business. Your mindset is within a specific period of time, I should be able to get returns. So when corporations were formed, when we started having joint stock companies, there was the perception that every organization is maximally for profit making. There weren't other considerations in terms of other stakeholders, environment, social impact of our corporate actions. So that had been the traditional narrative. But with sustainability becoming a buzz and a very key thing for organizations to consider, we would realize that there is a shift from that traditional approach. Now, you would know that there's been frequent increasing floods. If you live in any part of Nigeria, even if you live abroad, at least in your lifetime, you must have encountered one incident that sort of impacts on our planet. You have floods, you have wildfires, you have droughts, you have rising sea levels, and everybody experienced the COVID-19 pandemic. That was a crude awakening on how we have to start thinking about the planet in our corporate actions. And also considering other stakeholders, aside from our shareholders and investors who we seem to prioritize more because we want to maximize profits for the investments in organizations. Now, organizations of all sizes, there is no organization that is exempted from the discussion of sustainability. Organizations of all sizes are required currently to step up their game and start thinking about how they can operate in a world where we can ensure that our planet is safe, there's transparency in our businesses, and our economy is prosperous while our planet thrives. Having established those introductory comments, I just want us to look at some quotes that sort of give us a wake-up call. Robert Swan, who is a polar explorer and an environmental leader, he said that the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. So when we talk about the planet is declining, we're possibly thinking is the next generation that would come with the solutions. But it's a lie. Because the truth is, if we keep living the way we are living, if our corporate actions keep having social and environmental impact, we'll probably not have a planet to bequeath. We'll probably raise all the profit and there is no, the next generation don't have a planet they can enjoy all the wealth we are amassing. So we have to break from that mindset that it is someone else's responsibility apart from us to do something about preserving our planet and ensuring that we are living sustainably. Now, historically, all human beings have experienced climate variabilities, like I already mentioned, irrespective of your location or your lifetime. At some point, you must have come across erosion in our farmland, somewhere in the village. You must have had torrential heavy downfall when our houses are soaked and then we have floods taking our properties. I mean, if you live most in Lagos or even last year when we had the floods, we realized that people said that the environment was revolting. Okay, so you realize that these things bring to the fore that climate and planet considerations is very key. Now look at these statistics from the UN in 2017. It says the global population is expected to reach 9.8 billion people by 2050. And humanity is using up more resources than the planet can regenerate. So that is a crude awakening. It tells us that our population keeps increasing, but there is no replenishment of our planets. So how do we even consider, what's the guarantee that we'll have a planet that we can live in the next 20 years? If we keep experiencing the decline in the planet, but our population growth is still spiraling high. So now I want us to delve a little bit deeper into the purpose of organization, like I mentioned in my introductory comments. In 1971, a very great economist, his name is Milton Friedman, he's the gentleman up in the picture that you can see before you. So he published a very engaging article, and that article basically proposed that businesses have sole responsibilities to ensure that the shareholders are happy. So that created a foundation that really puts organizations on that profit maximization drive. So that proposition basically helped us to realize that many organizations are more profit maximization focused because of the principles that Professor Milton Friedman postulated in the 1971 article. But the truth is that there's been a shift from that position progressively over the years, because with the ever-increasing economic and social issues witnessed globally, it's now becoming evident that it's impossible for an organization to focus on only one key group of stakeholders, which are shareholders. It's become clear that the organization interacts with, beyond shareholders, you have companies that operate in communities, you have employees in those organizations, you have customers, you have other stakeholders. And it's becoming increasingly evident that it's impossible for an organization to thrive without all of these stakeholder groups. And it's impossible to also focus on ensuring that one stakeholder group is happy and to the detriment of all the others. So there's been a shift on the focus and the purpose of organizations from the traditional profit maximization agenda to now a wider stakeholder view, which ensures that all stakeholder groups' needs are considered in corporate actions. So whether it's working in a safe environment, creating a safe environment for employees, or reconfiguring your supply chains to be more resilient, whether it's even creating payment terms, because if you don't have generous payment terms, your customers might not be able to take your goods, okay? And then you have a payment plan where they would repay within a specific period. So you're also considering customers in that ambit. You also think about the community you're operating. Think about your products, how your products hampering or enhancing the environment. So organizations they're now required to adopt a larger stakeholder view when it comes to the value proposition and the purpose of organizations. So now we're looking straight into the introduction on what sustainable value creation really means. We'll attempt to really understand the concept and the importance of sustainable value creation. We'll look at what it means when you hear the triple bottom line, and would try to highlight the benefits and business advantage of sustainable value creation. Okay, so now we look at the purpose of sustainable value creation. What does it really mean? Now, the term is basically a practice. When you think about sustainable value creation, the idea behind it is organizations thinking long-term about their economic, social, and environmental value when it comes to business decisions. So you're not only taking corporate action that ensures that your shareholders have profits, or that your organization is functional and attracting more investors because you are high up there in your profit ratings. But sustainable value creation requires organizations to now think about other stakeholders, think about the economic impact of your operations, think about the social impact of your operations, think about the environmental impact of your operations. Okay, so unlike the traditional business practice, there is now a more holistic approach to ensuring that all stakeholders' needs are met. And this is more or less like a long-term perspective. Short-term perspective is profit maximization. Long-term perspective is ensuring that all stakeholder groups' needs and requirements are met. Now, when it comes to sustainable value creation, there are benefits, okay? Benefits in the sense that sustainable value creation ensures that the organization builds stronger relationships with their stakeholders. It also improves brand reputation. As we'll see in the next few slides, there's some of our customers that would only patronize certain organizations. Why? Because they have policies and structures that ensure that they are delivering sustainable value to the stakeholders. And it's actually a very high percentage when it comes to this category of customers that would rather patronize brands that are thinking long-term profitability. Okay, so we even have employees. There's an index taken. Employees actually responded that they would rather work with an organization that is thinking about social and economic impact of their operations and even take a lesser pay. Why? Because that organization is thinking long-term. That organization is functioning sustainably than working in an environment where there isn't any sustainability in terms of even employees. There are no considerations on how employees fare in the organization. Now we'll look at what the triple bottom line is. With the narrow shareholder perspective, you realize that most organizations, when you hear the bottom line, we're talking about profits. So the bottom line, the single bottom line, focuses on how the organization is going to create wealth and reward its shareholders. But the triple bottom line requires that the organization to think about how its actions, how its investment decisions, how its risk management strategies is going to ensure that you're not just only scoring points on profits, but you're also looking at people. You have people considerations in your business decisions, and you're also considering the planet. So the idea behind the triple bottom line is a framework that ensures that the organization is taking into account beyond the financial performance, also considering social factors, considering environmental factors when you're thinking about your corporate decision. So the triple bottom line is a yardstick. When we look at your financial information, investors wouldn't only look at your financial information. They'll look at the other bottom line. How are you faring in the people past? You can't be creating wealth at the detriment of people. Possibly you have very poor working conditions. Possibly your supply chain is sourced from a very underdeveloped country where they practice very poor labor practices, or your work processes sort of degrade the environment. So an organization should ensure that on all three bottom lines, there are scorings that ensure that there is a balance. Corporate decisions consider profits, people, and planet considerations. So that is the concept behind the triple bottom line framework. Now we'll look into the benefits. What does sustainable value creation really have to offer? Because you'll probably be wondering, how is it going to benefit my organization if I'm thinking about the society, thinking about social considerations or environmental considerations? There's a higher return if I think short term. Because if I put in investments, corporate actions that ensure that I have returns within the short term, it sounds or it appears to be more productive than thinking long-term. The returns may not be high yielding immediately, but there are statistics have shown us that there is actually benefits, long-term benefits when it comes to sustainable value creation. And one of them is those organizations that consider social and planet considerations, they actually have stronger relationships with their customers. Remember, at the end of the day, your products and your services will hit customers. If you are able to build a brand where customers are loyal to you, over a period of time, you have built a brand that attracts loyal customers and there is consistent patronage. Okay, so you can build short-term, thinking short-term, you can have customers, you can have profits over a short-term period, but over a longer-term period, there may be a decline because the factors that impact on your social and your environmental consideration will topple all the profit maximization agenda that you have been driving. So now a recent survey found that 66% of consumers are willing to actually pay more for sustainable brands. And this has increased customer loyalty and also it will translate into higher profits and long-term success for the organization. Now, you would also realize that companies that are thinking about sustainable value, they actually attract top talents. So that brand reputation makes it attractive for top talents. They want to work with organizations that have values that positively impact the society. So you can find organizations, although they're performing very well, but they have a very high turnover. People keep leaving those organizations. Why? Because even though they are high paying, you'd realize that some of the practices in the organization, they're not responsible. They're not thinking about sustainability. But if an organization is putting considerations into sustainability in its corporate structure, you would see that there is attraction for, that organization can attract quality employees and top talents who would stay and work with the organization to boost its long-term profitability. Now move on to look at other facts and figures when it comes to sustainable value creation. Now there's a case for sustainable business, and the truth is it also helps the organization to manage its environmental, social, and governance issues. And the organization also has long-term resilience. So an organization that is practicing has sustainable practices, for instance, an organization that is using its waste, it ensures that there is minimal waste in its environment, in its manufacturing process. At the end of the day, there would be less waste in the organization, in the environment, and that less waste will also translate into cost savings. Because most times in the manufacturing processes, you realize that because there isn't efficient management of materials, there may be a higher purchase of materials because there isn't that sustainability is not ingrained in the strategy of that manufacturing organization. But if the organization has a process that ensures that you are putting in place processes that enhance sustainability, the organization may use less materials. And that will also run into cost savings, which we'll see in one of the case studies as we move on in the presentation. Now, to put this in context, at EY, there was a future consumer index, and that index was published in 2021. And it actually put this in perspective for us, because it found that 49% of global consumers prefer to buy eco and climate-friendly products. And this number is definitely progressive. And then we'll move on to 49% of consumers also prefer brands that have an agenda. They have put up value systems where they want to change the world and make positive impact. So consumers are attracted to those kind of brands. I will see in one of our case studies as well, we're going to see some of these indexes in practical terms. Now move on. A study also found that 56% of global consumers prefer to buy services from companies that have a strong sustainability agenda. Okay, so organizations that in their non-financial information, they provide a strong statement that the organizations that have sustainability in view, and they are working towards ensuring that that agenda is driven. They have set timelines, they have set targets for the meeting of certain sustainability metrics and standards. So 56% of global consumers prefer those kind of organizations, prefer to patronize the services of organizations that have such strong sustainability agendas. Now, when it even comes to risk management, it's also possible for you. Sustainability also drives risk management. How is that possible? When you think about climate change, water scarcity, and poor labor conditions, it is possible for an organization to weave in sustainability in its work process to ensure that there are no disruptions in its supply chains and its production processes. So if an organization possibly works in an environment where there is water scarcity, the organization from the go devises a strategy that ensures that you are maximizing the amount of water sources that is available. So once sustainability is weaved into the work processes and the strategy of the organization, you minimize the risks that comes with water scarcity. You minimize the risk that will come with particularly organizations in the beverage sector. Our next slide. So this is an example for Coca-Cola. I wanted to reference that so that we see it in practical terms. Now, Coca-Cola, for example, at a point in time, they faced water shortages. Remember that Coca-Cola is liquid products, and water is an important component in the manufacturing of Coke. So in India, in 2004, there was water shortages, and that led to a shutdown of one of its plants. So what did Coca-Cola do? Coca-Cola decided to invest $2 billion to reduce the use of water and improve the water quality in the communities it operates. So what does this do? That is enhancing sustainability, and in the long term is also going to help its business processes, because those water shortages will become a thing of the past. Because progressively, if those sustainability strategies are implemented, those sustainability plans are put in view over a progressive period of time, there wouldn't be any issues of water shortage in that community in India where this incident occurred. So now sustainability can also be a means of access to new markets. How is that possible? You realize that when companies start to think about how to operate more sustainably, they become more innovative. They start to think about the stakeholders' needs and how they can create new products that address those needs. Now, Procter & Gamble is a classic example of how this plays out for sustainability as an access to new markets. At some point in time, Procter & Gamble realized that most households in US, when they use the detergents for household washing, they realized that the detergents required heating, and that would also impact on electricity costs, and they need heating to wash clothes. So the Procter & Gamble began to think about how it could implement a strategy whereby each product required less warm water. So they decided to start cold water detergents. So these cold water detergents required 50% less energy and didn't require warm water. So that's energy cost reduced for households. And I mean, in a typical household where you are saving energy by using the detergents, you can imagine how so many consumers would prefer that product that is a cold water detergent compared to the one where you would need more heating and spend more energy on using those detergents. So that is a means how Procter & Gamble was able to access a new market, because it thought about sustainability and how you could bring about economic reduction in its processes. Now we'll look finally at sustainability and financial performance. The truth is, in as much as we perceive that sustainability isn't really a priority because we want to satisfy our shareholders, the same investors are paying attention to our non-financial information. These investors are looking not just only at our profit ratings, but they're also looking to check, are these organizations disclosing in its investment decisions? Are we considering other non-financial factors? Are these organizations, are they thinking about things that are essential beyond financial information? So to realize that in EY 2015 Global Index Institutional Investors Survey, institutional investors actually stated that they considered non-financial disclosures. Non-financial disclosures have to do with sustainability reporting, how an organization is factoring sustainability in its business processes. So investors are looking at non-financial information to make investment decisions, because at the end of the day, these investors are human beings. They live on the planet with the rest of us. They also want a sustainable future. We want to be able to bequeath a planet that is sustainable. So beyond thought that profit maximization is a priority for investors. On the other hand, investors are actually also considering non-financial disclosures to ensure that they are investing in organizations that are thinking sustainably. And look at the index. The percentage, 59.1% of respondents actually declared that they were looking at disclosures, non-financial disclosures, compared to 2014, when the ratings was 34.8. So there is a progressive rise just under a year. There's a progressive rise in the need for organizations to start thinking about sustainability and ensuring that they are also disclosing their sustainability practice in their financial reporting. Now, the other thing we'd realize that thinking about cost reduction and our sustainability agenda also helps us in more operational efficiency and also reduces our cost of business. In the long run, if you are utilizing your natural resources like water and energy more efficiently, you minimize waste. You will save on the cost that would have gone in ensuring when you are not thinking about sustainability. So there is that significant cost reduction. Organizations that are thinking about sustainability and weaving in sustainable practices in their corporate structure. Now we're going to the very interesting part, which is to look at case studies on how sustainable value is created and what other organizations have done in terms of factoring sustainability in the fabrics of their processes. So we're going to look at one classic case. I chose Nike footwear because we can relate to most of us, I believe, apart from thinking about sustainability in terms of your corporate organizations, we're also thinking about how we can also live sustainably. Okay, so typically a lot of us might be fans of running and early morning walks and jogs. That appears to be very prevalent these days. So you definitely be familiar with Nike footwear at least. So I chose this because it's a relatable organization, and what they've done in terms of sustainable value creation is something very significant. So we'll look at Nike footwear, how they're able to use sustainability with innovation to create a line that they call the Fly Knit line. Now we know that Nike is a world supplier of athletic footwear and apparels, and their revenue is constantly rising. Now, what led to the desire to think sustainably, particularly the strategy that they employed for this case study, is they were challenged by their stakeholders. So athletes actually challenged Nike to design an ultimate fit shoe that feels like a socks. However, it's designed for high performance. So think about it. Typically, when you wear footwear, your sneakers, it kind of feels heavy even when you're walking, particularly the kind that has extra padding underneath. So athletes felt like the Nike can think more sustainably and come up with a perfect footwear that is not only light, but high performing. Now, what did Nike do? Nike went to the drawing board and started to think about the design, because based on the considerations at the time, Nike actually had its manufacturing processes sourced from various parts of the world. So at the end of the day, when these components are brought together, I realized that there is some form of waste. So Nike tried to design a strategy whereby they are meeting the needs of their stakeholders, but they're also thinking sustainably on how to improve the environment. And how was this achieved? That is how we arrived at the Nike Flight Knit technology. And what does this mean? Nike Flight Knit is already been patented. So it's a patent, it's an innovation that belongs to Nike, but it also opened the window for other athletes organizations to start to think about how it is possible to actually put manufacturing processes into the design of footwear, and it is sustainable. Now, the Nike Flight Knit is a very lightweight fabric that is engineered with an average of 60% less waste than the traditional footwear. Now, how is this achieved? What Nike did was it went into land waste and took plastic bottles. So these plastic bottles were processed into yarn. If you look in the background, I'll show you maybe the next slide, you'll see the picture. The average Flight Knit footwear comprises of 6 to 7 plastic bottles. So these plastic bottles are put through an engineering process where it is formed into yarn. Yarn is like thread. And then it's used to design the outer layer of the Nike shoe. So it was able to achieve a material that is sustainable and also lightweight. So the needs of the stakeholder is considered in the formation of the flight need technology, and the need of the environment in terms of reducing waste is also considered. And it was a very novel innovation because you realize that the flight need actually reduced 80% of waste compared to the regular cut and sewn footwear. The flight need was launched in 2012, and it has since reduced 3.8 million pounds of waste. That is massive. 3.8 million pounds of waste is reduced that from the environment. So you realize that 180 million bottles from landfills where they would have just been left there to decompose, all of that was lifted off the shoulder of the environment so that the environment can breathe and regenerate. So this Nike model is hinged on the idea behind creating a lightweight sturdy athletic shoe that is still high performance, but also things sustainable. It's sustainable in that the mesh, the yarn that is used to produce this flight needs, because it's made from plastic bottles, you realize that the variability of its decline or its getting bad is very minimal, because the yarn is actually a specialized system and it uses minimal labor. So you see that the economic factor is also considered in the production of the flight need technology. Now, the Nike flight knit shoe is actually a groundbreaking. Let me just, yes. So you can see the picture before you. That's the green thread to the corner was produced with plastic bottles, and then it's weaved to form the outer layer of the Nike flight knit shoes. So since this technology was produced, Nike has had several lines of sneakers and footwear, athletic footwear, that they have deployed the flight knit technology to ensure that there is that sustainability, the environment is considered, and there is a decline, particularly in waste. Okay, so now beyond reducing waste, this flight knit shoe is also the highest performing shoe that Nike has ever made, which is impressive. Why? Because it's also lightweight. Remember that the materials are sourced from plastic bottles. And plastic bottles, by the time it's processed, it's yarn, it's just thread. It's just thread, so it's very lightweight. And that shows that they've met their stakeholder needs. And that particular flight knit shoe was high performing. It sold. And as a matter of fact, athletes had a preference for the flight knits. So you see where, when you think sustainably, you also have patronage. You create a niche market where you have loyal consumers who are dedicated to purchasing those products because of sustainability is weaved into the fabric of the manufacturing process of that. So since then, there have been 28 models of the flight knit technology in the various Nike flight knit range, and they've had this included in training for soccer, basketball, golf, even lifestyle. So maybe the next time you're trying to buy a Nike shoe, you can just check out the flight knit range and ensure that you purchase one, because that way you also realize that you're contributing to environmental sustainability. Okay, so moving on to the next case study, we'll be looking at a German textile company. The name of the company is Infantium Victoria GmbH. So it's registered, it's a German company. And what does this organization do? They actually specialize in children's clothes. And what they've done is their design is based on products that are sustainable. So they use materials that are eco-friendly. And then they plan it in such a way that there isn't any waste when it comes to cutting the materials. So from the foundation of the process of manufacturing those clothes, it is custom to precision to minimize waste. Because most of us, we go to tailors, right? If you go to a tailor shop, what do you find typically? You find pieces of materials here and there. Some of them will be packed in a very tall, massive bag, and you realize that all of that is waste that will go in the dump field. They don't use it. So Infantium Victoria ensures that its work process is cut to the T, that there is minimal waste. The other thing it also does is that it ensures that its supply chain, in terms of the sourcing of its materials, are from organizations that are also thinking sustainable. So they even provide information about the sources of their suppliers, the name and location of their production facility, Okay, they even provide information on the working hours and the fair pay for the organizations that are in the supply chain. So all of this shows that the organization is thinking sustainably and is also transparent in its manufacturing processes. Now, the other thing very interesting that Infantium also does is that even after the production of its clothing, it also has a system, a recycling solution, where you have customers resell their used clothes. So imagine if you've worn a cloth and you're tired, probably you don't want to give it out, but you still want to make money, a little money, selling it off. If you purchase from Infantium, you can take it back. They will just do some amendment, check it, and then to be resold. So that is another way they've weaved in recycling solution into the structure of their manufacturing process. And particularly one thing that Infantium is very proud of is that it's subscribed to it's received the certificate for the global organic textile standards. So it ensures that all its products in terms of its supply chain, where it sources all its materials, they are from factories that are using GOTS certified materials. So they don't just think about controlling their own work processes, they also extend it to their supply chain to ensure that they are also implementing sustainable practices. So that's Infantium Victoria. The picture in the background is two kid models with the Infantium clothesline. Okay. So we'll move on to the next case study. And we're looking at Pan Pacific Melbourne. Is a hotel in Australia. So the picture you see there is the facility. And so what has Pan Pacific Hotel in Melbourne? And think about it, this is an organization in the hospitality industry. And you possibly think, how can a hospitality business even think sustainably? Because you are a service organization. It may be almost impossible to control how your customers interact with your products. But there are several things that Pan Pacific has done that we would look at, and we also think about the industries we operate in and how we can start to implement those sustainability practices. Now, Pan Pacific is known to be one of the greenest hotels in Melbourne. And what they've really done is they actually drive awareness on climate change. And even some guests actually visit Pan Pacific in what is called sustainable tourism. Because the organization, the hotel is known for being a very green organization. So you have people wanting to visit the hotel because they want to see how this organization is able to weave in. If you look at the picture that's to my right, you can see that there is a green area within, just around the hotel lobby, and there are green trees. So this is something people would be interested to actually see it practically. So that alone will be driving traffic to that organization, to that hotel, and it's also helping at the bottom line, while also thinking about the planet, okay? Now, what have they done? What kind of solutions have they implemented that really made this hotel stand out? The first is that they've recycled their wastes. Every single thing from fluorescent tubes, light bulb tubes, batteries, scrap metals, electronic devices, everything in that hotel is recycled. They've even gone ahead to even think about the resources in the hotel rooms, like plastic cups. They've taken away plastic cups, take away containers, straws, everything plastic is changed to 100% biodegradable material, and they use bamboo, the same bamboo we know in most of our rural environments. Can produce a straw with bamboo, a cup with bamboo, a plate with bamboo. All of this is ensuring that they're using materials that are biodegradable and eliminating most of these plastic materials that usually you would find typically in hotels. You know how we go to hotels and you find small plastic shampoo and cream, all of those things, they are plastic. If you finish using the content, you'll throw it away. But they have realized that when you throw those things away, it's still going to harm the planet. So they've weaved into the process of how they do business. They are thinking sustainably, and they have tried to eliminate the use of plastic, and opting for biodegradable materials. What else have they done? They've even gone ahead to implement lighting systems where they have sensors where the light will turn off automatically if it's not in use. So these are little things that they've done, which may appear insignificant, but in the long term, they actually have impacts. Now, one interesting one that I found so interesting, particularly because if we think of our homes, these are things that we we encounter. You know how when you use a soap, a bar soap, and it's almost exhausted, and sometimes it will fall through the drain or is littered everywhere. You would find that in hotels. Maybe a guest checks out, they've unwrapped the soap, but they've left it there, and since it's been used, the room service guys will come and take it away and probably trash it and put a new soap. The Pan Pacific Hotel implemented a program that they've called Soap Aid. So what they've done is they take those used bar soaps, they collect them from the guest rooms, they clean them up, and they repurpose them to multi-full bar soaps that is donated to communities in developed countries. So you realize that even instead of throwing away those small soaps that are left by guests, they take them out. Every time room service goes around, they have a special bag where they collect all the soap, and it's repurposed to large bars and sent, donated to communities in developing countries. So you see how they're able to think about how there isn't waste. It's like a circular economy. There is reuse of material that supposedly would have been waste if they hadn't implemented such a procedure. Now, what else have they done? They've also thought about repurposing their furniture. So in 2018, when they had a massive renovation of the hotel, what they did was to, instead of just trashing the rest of those materials, sending them to the landfill, they donated all their desks, chairs, and televisions to Salvation Army. So it was used to equip a charity organization that also does a lot of development work in developing countries. So that's another thing they have done. So you realize that they also contribute to raising environmental awareness, so that there's constant interaction with guests about environmental awareness, how guests can think more sustainably. And when people come for this sustainable tourism, they can see practically what the hotel is doing in its sustainability agenda. And believe you me, over a long period of time, there are loyal customers. Those sustainable practices actually draws people to patronize Pan Pacific Melbourne. Okay, so we'll move on to one last case study rather, and this is NG. So NG, I wanted us to look at one organization in an area that we usually think is almost impossible to operate sustainably, which is the energy industry. So NG is a French company in the energy sector. And what they've really done is to try and ensure that their business activities is really focused on energy, renewable energy, and reducing their carbon usage. So what have they done? They have set standards, they set targets that they are working progressively towards, ensuring that by 2045, in line with the net zero, they're going to ensure that there is less greenhouse gas emission, they're reducing their carbon intensity, and they're also setting goals to ensure that over a period of time, there is minimal use of the energy sources that harm the environment. They now also expand the net of renewable energy that they had. They have operations in Chile. In Chile, prior to now, they only used renewable energy sources, 1% of renewable energy sources. But over the period of time, that number has risen to about 45%. So it's a progressive work, but they are proactive, ensuring that it's a long-term goal to ensuring that their operations are no longer or is less harmful to the environment. Now, what other things have they done? They've even thought about their employees, because you realize that when you're thinking about reducing your energy mix, some jobs will be lost. Maybe people that were actually working in the production line where there is high carbon emission. At some point, when you reduce your energy mix to more environmental friendly sources, those people who were working in that sector, they may actually lose their job because there wouldn't be work for them. So what they've also done is to think about activities in creating skill development, so there is a transition for those category of employees. Okay, they're also cooperating with companies, governments, and civil society to ensure that there is that inclusion, and employees who may have to lose their job as a result of the sustainable practices they're implementing, they have an alternative in terms of providing skills and ensuring that there is a smooth transition for employees in that category. They've also ensured that there's a safe work environment. We're going to talk about culture. So what they've done is implemented a work culture that highlights no life at risk and no mind at risk. So this is a program that is designed to ensure that there is reduced injury frequency in their operation. So it is a corporate culture that is ingrained in their operation. to ensure there is a safe work environment for all of these employees. And finally, what they have also done beyond just talking the talk, they also walk the walk. NG is a part of a pressure group where they're also like a task force in implementation of non-financial reporting in Europe. They've also gone ahead to ensure that their books provide information massively on sustainability. So they have sustainability books alongside their financial statements, and there is clarity and transparency on some of the things they are doing in terms of sustainability standards. They also get involved in debates, regulations on things that will bring about sustainable development, and they participate in these public debates either directly or through their business association. So they are very vocal and they engage in discussions on sustainability. So it's beyond just having a CSR program. They are actively involved in ensuring that their processes are working progressively towards sustainability, and they are also taking engagement in the community, in government discussions. They're ensuring that they are the forefront in the drive for sustainability in their operations in Europe. Okay, so what have we learned in all that we've discussed from these case studies? One thing is key, is that it's possible to integrate sustainability in our innovation process. Look at what Nike did. Nike had a challenge thrown to it by its stakeholders, and they took it on and they went back to their processes. They designed the flight knit technology, and they came up with a solution that has revolutionized the athletes' footwear industry. So it is possible if we think particularly about innovation and how technology can help us arrive at solutions that would create sustainable value for our respective stakeholders. Now, the other thing we'd realize is that when we apply the sustainability lens, it's also possible for us to have that impetus to think about how we can recycle things within our manufacturing processes. Think about how we can ensure that our supply chain, so it goes beyond the organization trying to manage just your work processes. It's possible for you to even look down your supply chain, like what Infantium Victoria did. It's possible for you to actually regulate the supply chain. It's a progressive work, definitely. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But to start thinking about how that is possible and come up with innovative ideas, it can be done. Now, the other thing is, we note that some of these companies we have considered this in the case study, what they've actually done is most of the sustainable value they've come up with were inspired by their stakeholders. So you have influence from external entities like their suppliers, their customers. That is why we're going to have the discussion on stakeholder engagements, because you cannot be thinking about sustainability if you don't understand what your stakeholder needs are, particularly with Nike. You see that the challenge was thrown by stakeholders because they listened, they engaged with their stakeholders, and they listened to what the needs were, and they implemented it in their design structure, and even came up with a solution that is not only meeting the needs of their key stakeholders, who are people, investors, and consumers, but they are also considering the people and the planet consideration in coming up with the flight knit technology. The other thing that we also realize is these case studies also brought up initiatives that brought about cost reduction, energy savings, recycling, eco-innovation, and digitization, okay? And then there's also transformation towards renewable energy sources. So the lessons we've learned is that some of these sustainability initiatives are possible because some of these organizations, they have implemented things that have worked, and we can start to think within an organization. It's a discussion that is progressive. We can start to think within our structures. How can we start to put tweaks within our processes that will help us to accommodate sustainable practices and sustainability? So we'll look at the exploring emerging trends. So what are the current trends when it comes to sustainable value creation? We'll also identify challenges, because with every process, with every new novel concepts, there are challenges and obstacles that organizations will face. So we have to be aware of that. So we are going to consider those things and see how we can find solutions to some of these. Now, the first trend we're looking at we'll be highlighting three basic trends. The first one is a trend that is called circular economy. Now, the concept circular economy has been gaining significant traction, particularly because the idea behind circular economy is traditionally when we have in our manufacturing process, we have what is called a linear economy, in that you want to produce a pen, you would source all the materials for this pen. After you're done with this pen, this shell is thrown, you throw it away. You don't reuse this. So that is linear economy. Our thought process, our work processes in manufacturing, and even in our systems are designed to use and dispose. But the idea behind circular economy is that organizations have to start thinking about how they can create a loop where products are manufactured and reused. So that is a circular economy. You have a pen that you produce. After this pen is done, the new trend is that organizations start thinking about a system where this pen can be reused either to produce another pen or put in the value chain of another product where it doesn't go to the landfills for waste, but is reused in the production of other products. So that's the idea behind circular economy. It explores ways where we can think about designing products that have longevity. Okay, implementing recycling systems, programs, and circular supply chains, where we are constantly reusing our materials and minimizing waste. So that is a trend that is very prevalent now. A lot of organizations are thinking about the circular economy. Organizations are bringing up products that have the concept of circular economy, where there is minimal waste. There is minimal waste to ensure that the economy is moving. So we're not having products going back to the landfills, but it's being reused. So that's the concept behind the circular economy. Now, the other trend is climate action and carbon neutrality. So there is a lot of discussions about climate change. I mean, if you don't even need to go to Google to search up climate action or carbon neutrality. In most organizations, most discussions, most trends, you heard the buzz, climate change, climate action. What are we doing about the environment? A lot of organizations are now beginning to set targets to reduce some of their products that have some climate impact. So the significant trend is ensuring that there is minimal emission of waste that would have an impact on the climate. But now organizations are beginning to think about sustainable practices within their operations, something as simple as switching off the lights. If you have light source in your office, you don't need to have the light on. That's another, that you don't need to have the electric bulb on. You can put it off. So those are, if you weave that into your work process, it becomes a policy. That is also climate action. That way you are reducing energy use. You're not wasting energy. Because in the long run, that also helps you save costs. Because if you're using less energy, your bills will be less. Okay? You can also think about sustainability in choosing the location of your office. If you get an office in a place that is enclosed, where you don't have access to light source, you realize that you would always need to have the electric bulb on because you need the place to be illuminated. But if you think about sustainability in the choice of the location of your office, you would also have access to light sources that would help you to reduce electric energy use. So that is also a form of climate action. I think about how we can implement certain actions that reduce impact on the environment. So climate action and carbon neutrality is another trend that is creating a buzz in the global frame. Now, the third trend is ethical and responsible supply chain. If you remember when we treated in Phantom Victoria, a lot of organizations are constrained in that our manufacturing processes, our products are sourced from various places, and we have several supply chains where we're not really able to control what our suppliers are doing in terms of, if you are an organization probably in the mobile phone manufacturing industry, and you only assemble the mobile phones at your corporate location in a particular country, but then all the other components of the mobile phones are from several countries where they actually practice poor labor practices that are unethical, or they use materials that are not sustainable. It may almost seem like the organization is helpless because you cannot control the supply chain. But the current trend is that a lot of organizations are beginning to think ethically and ensuring that their supply chains are implementing responsible practices. So there is that demand. Consumers and stakeholders are creating increasing demand for accountability from the manufacturing organizations or the organizations that they interface with. So organizations are now required to insist and ensure that they understand their manufacturing supply chains, how the products are sourced, and ensuring that those supply chains are implementing responsible practices. Because at the end of the day, organizations will be required to report, make disclosures on the sources of the products that we come up with and we send to the market for our consumers. So that's another third trend that is emerging, and a lot of organizations, there will be increasing pressure. So the earlier we begin to think about our responsibilities in line with this trend, we wouldn't be put under pressure when there is now demand that we haven't even put in any processes to ensure that we are demanding our supply chains to be more responsible. And this would also help in fostering trust, because if we're disclosing how our supply chains are ethical, we'll have trust and the much needed loyalty. It also enhances our brand value and minimizes our reputational risks. So these three areas are the top three. There are others, but these are the top three trends that are emerging in the area of sustainability, which we need to really begin to think about how organizations can start to weave policies around ensuring that we are compliant. Because the thing about emerging trends, the first adopters are usually the forerunners when it comes to implementing these trends. Once your organization has processes that consider ensuring that these trends, we have processes that subscribe to these new trends, you are attracting new investors. So when they come, when the pressure comes, you are clearly disclosing that, oh, we are compliant in this area. This is what we do. This is what we do. This is what we do. But that starts with responsible action, which we must start to implement from today. Now, what are the challenges? Because there definitely are inherent challenges that we need to think about. And one of it is changing regulatory landscape. Because the truth is, in as much as organizations operate in a regulatory environment, there is constantly new laws and regulations that are aimed at promoting sustainability. Just on the 28th of June, at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, there was released a new standard for sustainability reporting that subscribes to the International Financial Reporting Standard. That is a new, so progressively, most public companies will have to be looking at how they can be reporting along with this new sustainability standard. So these are new regulatory changes, which organization, and it's a challenge because why is it a challenge? We have so many regulatory entities. We have so many compliance standards. Organizations have to stay informed and engage with regulatory bodies and proactive in implementing measures to ensure that we are meeting up our regulatory expectations. That can pose a challenge because remember, you have to engage stakeholders. You still have to meet the needs of the respective stakeholders, and you still have to have your eyes on regulatory changes. So that can be a challenge for an organization that is possibly not so thriving, but you operate in that environment and you are bound by those laws. So that is the first challenge organizations would encounter in line with implementing sustainable value. Now, the other thing is stakeholder engagement. Now, think about it. When you have an organization that operates in a sector where you have multiple stakeholders, and before you come up with your thinking about how you can create sustainable value, you have to engage with stakeholders. And this stakeholder benchmark is quite massive. You have employees, you have customers, you have local community, you have investors, and you have to actively communicate and collaborate with them. How is that possible? That's a challenge. Because if you are not able to gauge and understand their needs, it will be impossible to firm up policies that really meet those needs. So that also poses a challenge on its own. However, organizations have to think about how they can come up with stakeholder engagement strategies, which would look at as we progress in the slides. I just wanted to highlight that even stakeholder engagement and collaboration on this one is also a challenge for organizations that are thinking about sustainable wealth and creation. Now, data collection and measurements. Now, think about it. An organization that possibly has a very effective, in their mind, an effective sustainability program. But however, you're not able to track data that actually measures the impact of your sustainability initiatives. So even if you set meaningful targets and there isn't a system to track how effective is this sustainability initiative, that becomes a challenge because data collection and measurement is important. It will help to check whether those initiatives are actually effective or you have to change them, or even for reporting on your non-financial information, you need the statistics. So data collection can be a challenge, particularly if you have so many stakeholders. How do you engage with them and collect the data? You would need technology, most likely for this. And technology deployment would know comes at a cost. Okay, so organizations have to think about how they can implement robust data management systems and implement standardized reporting frameworks so that it is possible to really measure the impact of our sustainability initiatives and see how, if it is really adding value or it is not, and think about other ways we can create value. So data collection and management is very important. And it can be a challenge if an organization is not up to speed in that area. Now, most of these may sound like, okay, possibly foreign challenges. What are the challenges that are peculiar to us in the Nigerian environment? You'll possibly be wondering why. There's another slide we're going to look at some challenges that business owners in Nigeria would face or are encountering when it comes to sustainability. The first of it is waste generation and lack of effective management. So in Nigeria alone, the estimated waste that we generate per day is 0.65 to 0.95 kg per day. And that morphs into 42 million tons of waste generated in a whole year. And where would this waste be deposited? In landfills. These landfills will hold this waste, they will decompose, it's going to cause air pollution. These landfills could have been skyscrapers. Okay, buildings could have been built on those landfills, and then that will also create economic value. So you see that is also a challenge. Waste generation and effective management is a challenge for us in the Nigerian climate. So even in Nigeria, we practice poor refuse management practices. So you can find that there is inefficient implementation of some very great economic policies that we may have. There is implementation. There is also rapid urban development. So you find people constantly moving to the urban areas. The more people you have, definitely there's more waste generated. And there's population density. There's some places you go to, there's refuse everywhere. Why? Because there is a dense population of people living in those environments. So those things pose a challenge to us when it comes to thinking about how we can have an environment that is more sustainable. Okay? Now we think about the other thing is multiple taxation of businesses. So that can be a burden, because if you have an organization where you have multiple taxes, you have firms that they are struggling, okay? So they are making profits, but they're having to channel some of these profits in meeting their tax burdens. Gradually, the equity base of the firm will erode and that industry may fail. So you realize that when we're thinking about sustainability, even having massive tax burden can be a problem for businesses. So businesses can't even think about sustainability because they are focused on meeting their expectations when it comes to payment of the various taxes. Even for small businesses, as little as a kiosk down the road, you'll find council officers coming to ask for one revenue rate and the other. And the lady is just selling very minimal household things that wouldn't even generate so much revenue. So that puts pressure. Organizations are not interested or they are unable to think about sustainability because they focus in how do I meet the expectations in terms of the several revenue sources I have to pay in terms of taxation. So that is a challenge when it comes to thinking about sustainability. The third challenge is pollution. So pollution from all sources, air pollution, noise pollution, water pollution, all of this is linked to the poverty factor. We have dysfunctional public services, there's political decadence, and all of this just creates an air of, it's almost like we're overwhelmed, okay? We're overwhelmed. We feel like, we can't really do anything about sustainability because we already have our peculiar problems. So pollution on its own is also an area. Think about it, even if you live in streets where there isn't constant electricity supply, we have to run generators. That alone constitutes a nuisance, not only in the emissions, carbon emissions, but even in the noise. Okay, so some of these things are challenges that businesses in Nigeria encounter that sort of hampers their ability to think about sustainability. Okay, so having highlighted those challenges, we're going to now delve into a very important area, which is thinking about how we can engage our stakeholders. Okay. So we'll look at the various, who our stakeholders really are. Then we'll delve into the value, why stakeholder engagement is important. And we'll have a case study on stakeholder engagement, a very interesting one at it, and particularly to our client. Now, stakeholders are individuals or groups who would have impacts or will be affected by the operations of an organization. So when it comes to really engaging with stakeholders, it is vital because you cannot create sustainable value if you don't understand the needs and interests and concerns of the stakeholders. So that engagement is so important because it fosters trust. Remember, it's the same stakeholders that will patronize your products. So that engagement is important because even in your process of product design, this engagement will even give you an idea of the kind of products to come up with so that you don't release a product into the market that nobody wants. So stakeholder engagement is very important, not just for sustainability, but for even for our businesses to thrive. So what is the value? Why is stakeholder engagement important? You see, most times firms fail because they are unable to establish good relationship with their stakeholders. You realize that there can be conflicts. Think about it when possibly Nigerian Labour Congress is having conflicts with governments. What happens? There's a hike in everything. Suddenly transport is expensive, suddenly food is expensive, suddenly everything, it impacts on everybody. But when there is effective engagement with the various stakeholder groups, there is that conflict resolution is possible. Okay, conflict resolution is possible, and it will also help us to have that regular dialogue with our stakeholders. And with the continuous iteration, it's possible for the organization to come up with an agenda that is better positioned to even help our stakeholders and also meet the economic and social and environmental issues that would arise. Now, we cannot overemphasize the importance of stakeholder engagement. It is super, super, super important. And where do we even start from? You would agree with me that each organization, we all operate in several industries, and these industries have several respective stakeholders. So the first place to start before you even think about how you engage with stakeholders, to even identify who are your stakeholders. So that's where the most principal point is. You have to first identify your key stakeholders in your organization. And how do you go about that? Typically, in the bucket of stakeholders, you have employees, customers, suppliers, investors, regulators, local communities, NGOs. Each of these stakeholder groups, they have respective perspectives. They have respective expectations. So it's important for organizations to really look at, even in one organization that operates in several industries, an organization that is in consumer goods, for instance, you may have products that are targeted at maybe children's products. And then you also have another product that go for the elderly. So you realize that even in that product line, you have two different categories of stakeholders. So it's important for an organization to understand who their stakeholders are, what are their interests, what are their values, because most times decisions to purchase things depends on our values. If you're someone who doesn't drink, your value system says you shouldn't drink, you don't have any business, you wouldn't want to purchase alcohol. So that is the value, even our value system impacts on how our stakeholders, their perspective. So we need to understand their value so that we can target our products in that direction. Also think about initiatives that actually, cater to their values, cater to their concerns across the various stakeholder groups. So I've itemized employees, customers, suppliers, shareholders, society, and planets. We're going to get this slide. So I've itemized some of the things. So for employees, you treat people, you ensure that your corporate structure treats people with dignity and respect. So you create a safe work environment where your employees are happy to come to work. Coming to work is not a dread. It's like when most times we say, thank God it's Friday, and it's like, oh, I'm sad that it's Monday. When you have an environment, people are happy to come to work. They're glad that it's Monday, they can't wait. Okay, so you think about your suppliers as well. You partner to co-create value. So you're not just your value, the sustainable value creation doesn't just end at you as an organization. You can partner with your suppliers to co-create value so that it also gets down the value chain. Now, also for shareholders, you definitely think about in return on investment to ensure that that investment is also sustained, because there is that continuous patronage from shareholders. But you think about the society, how you can support communities where you live. You think about the planet. The planet is also a stakeholder because the planet that hosts us in our operations. So you think about how you can act as a steward of the environment for generations, because the environment was bequeathed to us. We should be able to also bequeath to the next generation an environment that is sustainable and that to take them even further down generations. Okay, so I've just highlighted all of these. We can take time to go through some of these, what an organization should consider in these respective stakeholder groups. So now the snapshot that we have before us is also it structures various stakeholder groups, and then at the middle of it, you have sustainable value. So in the creation of sustainable value, you have to factor, you see all the arrows come together to the middle as sustainable value. So each of these, after you have identified your stakeholders, whatever you are doing, whatever processes you come up with, you have to ensure that your suppliers, if they're part of your stakeholder groups, your competitors are part of your stakeholder group, because sometimes organizations don't operate in a silo. You have to think about what your competitors are doing, what strategies are they implementing, are those strategies effective? Is there a way you can also tailor yours to ensure that you are positioned in a competitive advantage, okay? So your competitors, they fall in the category of your stakeholders. So you're also looking at what your competitors in the industry are doing. So you have the environment, local communities, the society, okay, employees. So all of this, when you're thinking about creating sustainable value, you consider all these groups, and it comes nicely to the middle where sustainable value is created. So this pictogram is for us to really see how all of it comes together, and ensuring that all these various respective stakeholders we have identified, we are factoring their needs and concerns in our policies and our strategies for sustainable value creation. So now, after you have identified your stakeholders, what do you need to do in terms of implementing strategies for effective engagement? These are some strategies we can consider. So the first of it is to think about how you can open a transparent communication channel. So it's very important. It's very important because several of our stakeholders are in various groups. So it's possible that you would need to have effective communication channels that cater to these various stakeholder groups. So you have facilitate dialogue, a regular meetings, surveys, public consultations, a feedback mechanism. So some organizations have products, they don't even get feedback from the stakeholders, and you wonder why nobody's patronizing your products any longer, because there isn't a system for you to gauge the product reception in the marketplace. So a feedback mechanism is also a form of engaging with stakeholders. And when you have those processes in place, ensure that you actively listen to stakeholder feedback. Remember what Nike did with the flight meets. You went back to the drawing board, having gotten that challenge based on engagement with stakeholders. It came up with a product that meets the expectations of stakeholders, meets its profits and maximization expectation, and still meets the considerations of the planet. The other thing we look at is collaborations and partnerships. It's so important for organizations to think about, because the value chain would require you working with several collaborators, okay? So even working with stakeholders. So it's important for you to think about collaborations and partnerships to drive the engagement. So you can have possibly come up with a conference, it could be a meeting, it could be several things. There are innovative strategies we can think about how we can collaborate and partner with several stakeholder groups to ensure that we really get that engagement that we need to help us firm up the sustainability initiatives that will drive the value that is important for our business sustainability. Engagement and awareness is important because most times our efforts at sustainability, if there isn't effective communication, if you're not educating your stakeholders on why sustainability, particularly if you have stakeholders that are not aware, once there is engagement, education, and awareness, it is easier for the sustainability initiatives to thrive. Okay, so if you have workshop, training sessions, webinars, that was early in the year around March. I attended the webinar. This is not even it's not publicity for the bank, but okay, I shouldn't mention the name of the bank, but I attended a webinar where there was awareness about cervical cancer. And you'll probably be wondering, it wasn't done directly by the bank, but they had a partnership with a particular organization that is into advocacy for cervical cancer. And they had a webinar. So you see, they have incorporated collaboration and educational awareness. So at the end of the day, it's meeting the needs, because cervical cancer, cancer is almost like, it's very prevalent these days. And for women, it's a major challenge. So that particular bank has been able to implement a sustainability strategy that caters to a particular group, which is women, addresses a challenge which is prevalent amongst women, and also employed collaborations, partnership, and education. So you see how that strategy is implemented to engage with stakeholders. And at the end of the day, typically they sold their products. Anybody who's in that webinar that doesn't have an account with that bank would be happy to possibly subscribe to one of the products of that organization.
Sorry, am I the only one that lost our? Hello?
No, you're not. No, you're not.
No, you are not the only one. I guess it's on her side.
It's all right. Let me quickly confirm once. Sorry about that. Apologies once again. She'll be joining back shortly.